adventure in Pipeman on W4CY Radio.
Wake up, America! It's time for the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY.com, West Palm Beach's #1 internet radio station. Here's your host, the Pipeman.
This is the Pipeman here on the Adventures of Pipeman, W4CY Radio, and I'm very excited about our next guest. I know there's a bunch of people in our network that would be excited because we love horror flicks, and this one is really, really cool. You're going to want to check it out. So let's welcome to the show, Jeff Burton. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And so tell us a little bit about Ophelia. Where did the brainchild come to, in your head for this?
Yeah, so interesting story. When I was younger, I'm from Michigan and grew up just outside of Detroit. And in my city, there's a psychiatric hospital called Eloise. It closed down in the 80s, but at one point it was the biggest in the country, had its own zip code, its own fire department, all of that. It was massive. I remember when it closed down in high school a couple of times, sneaking in and scaring myself, walking around the halls and, pitch dark and just, it was scary. And that feeling never left me. And then a couple of years ago, I got a call from a high school friend who said, hey, guess where I'm at? I'm in Eloise. And somebody bought it and they're turning it into a haunted attraction. So the guy turned it, the first floor and the second floor, the basement and the first floor into a really high level haunted attraction. 2, 3, 4, and 5 is still paranormal investigators, all that kind of stuff. So I asked him, I said, if I come up with these ideas, I want to do like a horror universe, like Conjuring and Annabelle and, throw in an offshoot like Paranormal Activity. Could I shoot some of it here? And he's like, yeah, 100%. So I spent the next year, some with a writing partner and some on my own, coming up with 3 completed scripts for full-length movies. And then we decided, instead of lookbooks and, business plans and all that stuff, let's just do a proof of concept short. What do we want that short to be? It's got to stand on its own. It's got to get there. It's got to, and the idea for taking the character out of one of the movies and giving her own short film, in a sense, and kind of introducing people to what this could be.
And you know what? Right off the bat, like even from the trailer, it catches my attention right off the bat, which is the key to what you want. Because listen, you don't catch somebody's attention there, where are you going to catch it? But
right.
It interested me totally because of the fact that I've had my own experience with A, paranormal, but B, psychiatric hospitals. I used to live in a house in Marlboro, New Jersey, directly across from the Marlboro State Hospital, which also no longer there. And me and my bro used to sit outside on the front porch, and there was some weird stuff that would go on at night outside that hospital.
No
and
question.
We weren't sure whether it was real, paranormal, or what was going on. But it was like, I think we're going to go back inside.
I'm with you there.
And then I had another scenario. You're going to laugh at this one because this one I've never told on the radio ever. But my father was, he was kind of a party animal, and he ended up going nuts from that. And my family locked him up in a mental hospital in California. And I went down. He wanted me to break him out of the place. He called me. And so I was like, I don't know, 16 years old. I went down there. And when I walked in the place, it gave me the creeps the minute I walked in. So like something like this is not just a horror flick. It's like, it's real life, this stuff that happens. And so tell us a little bit, without ruining the movie, a little bit about the story behind the short and the full length movies as well.
So what I did was, I tried to create this backstory of, in the late 1800s, they were putting people in asylums for anything, like tuberculosis, gonorrhea, menstruation, like, not to mention just normal things, but even Parkinson's and like anything that they didn't know, you had to be crazy and they put you in an asylum. Well, what if in a remote area, the government actually authorized the build of a massive asylum for the worst of the worst, like people who were criminally insane and all that stuff. And what if there was a doctor that headed this whole thing and he did his own types of experiments, like really throwing the rule books away and anything goes? And what if this doctor had a little girl? That's where Ophelia came from. She saw all this.
Wow. And that's not even so far-fetched, because I lived in Agoura in high school, and 90% of my friends were locked up in Woodview, Calabasas, which is also no longer there, for the same type of reasons. Like, parents couldn't control their kids, so they didn't know what to do, so they got pitched to put them into these mental hospitals. And there is some weird stuff that goes on in mental hospitals that, again, that's what makes what you're doing so great, because it's not far-fetched. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on.
Well, I have this paranoia of what if you get wrongfully put in an asylum and they start giving you medications that completely put you in the mindset like you should be there, and not from the outside, they're looking at you like, see, he is crazy, but it's really just the medicine. And what if that gets worse and worse? So that, to me, is maybe the foundation for all of this. And one of the movies I wrote with one of my writing partners, which is right here, Seven Cells, that's what that's about, which is, what if you woke up in a concrete room, total darkness, you didn't know where you were, why you were there, and worse, who you are. And then you find out there's 7 others. That's like the first 5 minutes of that movie. And then it gets worse. So that's my paranoia. And then and that all happens to take place in this asylum 180 years later.
Wow.
But there's all this Ophelia stuff. And I have like an 1892 backstory film that kind of, you see it unfolding in real time. Then movies like the short film you saw take place present day. And is Ophelia a ghost? Is she, who was there with her? Because you saw the ending without giving anything away. So I think a lot of people have paranoia of, even if it's as basic as, what if your fate was out of your hands?
Which it usually is in those places.
Right. Yeah. And I started, with a super low budget movies, back when I was younger, and, that starts with just the simple, crazy person running around hacking people up. And, that's kind of what you cut your teeth on if you're a horror movie fan. And, I grew up on John Carpenter and, Friday the 13th as well. And that kind of stuff, Freddy Krueger. So that's all in me. But then all of a sudden, Scream came along and it was different. Then, the Blumhouse stuff with, their take on their early films, which, you get Annabelle and Conjuring and, different things from that time period, including Paranormal Activity. And so, having been around for a little while, I've experienced quite a few takes on the horror world. And I was also lucky enough, again, being from Michigan, when I made my first movie, I was introduced to a gentleman named Bill Vincent, who is the Michigan State University screenwriting professor. He was Sam Raimi's professor, and Sam Raimi did The Evil Dead and Army of Darkness and a bunch of great movies, including, Oz the Great and Powerful, plus the latest Doctor Strange multiverse movie. So he's a big time director, but he started with a couple $100,000, coming up with this idea in Michigan with his MSU professor. And I was lucky enough that professor introduced me to his brother, Ivan, who wrote Army of Darkness, Spider-Man 3, Drag Me to Hell. We became friends and we did some writing together. I did some writing with Bill Vincent, the professor. I also did some writing with a gentleman named Chuck Farrer, Pfarrer, and he's a former Navy SEAL who actually wrote the movie Navy SEALs back in the day with Charlie Sheen, and then went on to do quite a few big movies like Hard Target and The Jackal and Red Planet and, a whole host of movies. And working with these people, it really brought out, I was more visual. I cared about the shot and I cared about the audio and the sound design because I'm a former musician who, recorded hundreds of songs and scored my first 8 movies. But once I met these people and they taught me how to put a basic plot line together, movies have to have beats. You have to scare people at certain points. You got to do this stuff. And there's a process that people are used to receiving. Now you can always variate. You can always take risks and change things up. But generally speaking, there's a formula that if you can get a story to weave into those plot points and those expected things, and then some unexpected things, and then your own twist on things, that's when you start separating yourself from your early works.
Yeah. And you know what, though? I have to say, I personally sometimes like a low budget because I think you take some of the movies now that are remakes of movies from back when I was a kid, like 70s and 80s. I don't like the newer versions. Like I like the older versions, even though it didn't have the special effect. It's just more real. And one thing I can say is while I was watching Ophelia, I didn't get to feel it was low budget at all. I felt like it was like a full motion picture, and credit to you and because also not many things scare me too much. And
right.
That like we got Halloween. I go to haunted houses and I scare the people trying to scare me. Like I never really get scared in a haunted house, but in real stuff I've been scared, and that's the feeling I got from Ophelia. Like it was real. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't something where, oh, I know what's going to happen next. It was like, get me out of here.
I appreciate that. And a little side note, I did a screening at a theater and invited about 50 people, some people who worked on it and their families, the little girl and her mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles and stuff. And then other people that I've worked with through the years, because I took 7 years off just to write screenplays. Like I took some time off of filmmaking because I wanted to get better as a storyteller, because I knew I was always going to care about the picture and the audio. So I did a surround sound mix of Ophelia, which I'm proud of myself for learning how to do that. But as the person who did the sound design for it, I was able to, you sit in complete circumference of what that house sounds like. All that atmospherical, rumbling and those sounds and what have you are going on all around you, and giggles over here and creaking floorboards over here. And then somebody says Avery off to the front right. And, everybody, when it got done, that was the first time I ever felt really fulfilled, because everybody sat there in silence until the end of the credits, because, a little girl singing creepily with reverb is always good to sit around. And then they stood up and applauded. And I felt like they got it, because it was so important to me to have the audio really take and immerse people in it. Because if the audio is bad, as a viewer, it takes you out of the enjoyment. You can still follow the plot and this and that, but I felt like Ophelia that house deserved to be a character.
Mm-hmm. And that the audio, I agree with you, because the audio is what makes it more real. It makes you kind of engaged with it, and it's just like doing radio or a podcast. Like, there's people out there that have great content. If their audio is terrible, I don't want to hear it. It's like, right. It would not do it for me. And in the same way, a movie, like, I'm one of those type of people that, and people will say, how do you do that? Like, I'll watch a movie while I'm working, at night, or I'll watch a movie doing other things. It's the movie that gets me to stop doing those other things and sit and literally get consumed by the movie. That's a good movie. And to me, that's what Ophelia is.
Well, I appreciate that. I think one of the first thoughts after deciding to make a short version of one of the features was, I don't want to start at the beginning, have a little bit of the middle, have a little bit of this, have a little bit of that. I want to take these characters and let's assume that this was the second to last group of paranormal investigators that went into this house before the feature film. And I wanted to start at like the 11th hour. Like, right. I didn't want a slow burn. I didn't want to take 18 minutes to finally get to one cool thing at the end. I wanted to make it seem like everything's already gone wrong. Everything's already in a bad way. And this girl is about to, have a pretty bad 18 minutes.
Yeah. And, it's funny because when I first looked at it, I didn't see the writing part about headphones, and I was just looking at it. And then I noticed where it said, put headphones on. And man, that was good instructions. People need to follow instructions, because
right.
That made all the difference in the world too, because the sound that you're talking about and what you created, like, it totally, when you're putting the headphones on, it totally engulfs you. And right. It's almost like you're there.
That's how I like to feel in all the movies that I've done, is like, you are the extra character. Like, I do a lot of handheld stuff. I'm in with the people, and I wanted people to feel like they were in the house too.
Yeah. And that's the way it should be. Now, speaking of which, tell everybody how they can go to the website, how they can check out Ophelia, how they can see not only the trailer, but the full, movie. And anything you want that they would connect to you, socials, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So go to OpheliaMovie.com. You can watch the trailer and you can watch the short film there. It also shows, some movie posters, and we've entered a bunch of festivals, film festivals, and we're winning a lot of them. We're honorable mention. We've got best special effects makeup, best film, best little girl actor, different things like that. as you said, I recommend the best audio situation that you can possibly do, whether it's headphones. Some people have their computer set up with really nice speakers. If you've got a smart TV, you can just go to YouTube. You can put in Ophelia short movie. It pops up. Turn on your sound bar, turn on your subwoofer, because you're going to feel it, and just enjoy it. I mean, you can go to Shadow Lake Films on Instagram, reach out to us there. We just got that going. But the big thing here is just to share this short with people, get some buzz. And we want to turn this into finding the right people to make the films with.
Well, I think it is definitely the next best thing in horror, because also, too, like you said, you've gotten awards and people really love it at the film festivals. And that says a lot, because of any genre of movies, horror movies in those scenarios at those film festivals, there's a lot of competition. A lot of competition. So it says huge things that you or even notice, much less get awards in there. So that's a big reason in and of itself for people to check out the movie, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Is there anything else you want to let the listeners and the viewers know that we haven't covered already that they need to know about Ophelia?
No, I mean, I like keeping a certain level of horror movies alive. It's not even just Halloween. It's people like to be scared, whether it's roller coasters. I like to do stuff that is a little fantastic, in the sense that, you can get lost in it with not like mafia movies scare me, war movies scare me. This is good fun to me. And I think all the independent filmmakers out there, that are wondering if they should make a movie, just do it. I did it for no money, no idea what I was doing, and eventually got a little bit better and a little bit better. And it takes time, but just start, just do it.
Nice. Well, I think that's great advice. I also think, since I do all like music festivals, especially like the Danny Wimmer festivals, and just putting it out there, this would be a great idea. Like they have comedy things sometimes. It would be a great idea to have Ophelia or any of your other works in a music festival environment like that too, because it just goes hand in hand. So I'm just putting that out there in the world.
I completely agree. My first movie, I recorded 16 bands for the soundtrack. A lot of the music made it into the movie. I had a scene in the movie where there was a battle of the bands happening in the movie. So, people could get exposure that way. I sold copies of the CD. I'm a firm believer that music and sound in movies matters. In horror movies, it's key.
There you go. Absolutely. 100%. Well, I thank you for giving us this, because it's great creativity. I love it. I know all the listeners will love it. And thanks for being on the Adventures of Pipeman.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's good to meet you.
Thank you for listening to the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY Radio.